you're saying inflation after many, many years could come back again, set to rise. Now, by that, you're looking at the trend so far. If inflation is set to rise after 20 years of low, stable inflation, you say, could prices rise in 2021? Just look at that. This is global inflation from your data. It dropped from around 15% in 1990 for the last 20 years, averaging around 2.8%, and now it could come back again. That is an important factor to take into account in anybody's planning. And what are the reasons for inflation returning? You mentioned 4 Ds. One is depopulation. You're talking about labor shortages. The 4 Ds we are talking about. The second is deglobalization, especially when Trump was there. There's declining productivity, which means higher costs. And the 4th D is debt, so much money being printed. So these are the factors, Ruchir, that you're saying could lead to a slightly worrying fact that, and everybody must take this into account in their planning, that prices may start rising around the world again.
You know, the surest way for an economist to get discredited is to talk about higher inflation because that's been such a losing forecast for the last 30, 40 years.
Right.
Really, since the 1980s, you've had lower and lower inflation around the world. Many people keep calling for higher inflation. It just never seems to show up. But I think that what's happened now is very interesting. One, that in 2020, despite such a horrible economic contraction that we got in the global economy, inflation did not fall that much. It fell, in fact, even less than compared to 2008, 2009, when you had the global financial crisis. And I think there are some structural changes which are underway in the global economy. The same structural changes which kept inflation so low for so long, I think are one by one slowly beginning to reverse itself. Why was inflation so low for the last 30, 40 years? One was because you had this incredible era of globalization, where much more competition was entering the global economy. More and more people were joining the global workforce, more and more goods and trades and services, everything was booming in this era of globalization. That's changing. Many governments around the world are becoming more protectionist. Also, the population growth rate is slowing down, and you don't have so many new people entering the workforce as you did with China, India. Even in these countries, the population growth rates are slowing down. In China, in fact, the working age population growth rate has now turned negative. And then this entire factor of more and more government involvement in the economy has led to lower and lower productivity. So something which is also, I think, likely to lead to higher inflation going ahead. And the most important factor which I mentioned is just the incredible amount of stimulus that has been put to work this time. The order of magnitude is so great, and even though the stimulus effects will begin to fade in 2021, there is no appetite amongst policymakers to do anything to withdraw the stimulus or to tighten. So I think that these factors could slowly contribute to inflation bottoming out and to inflation rising. Now, these are very slow changes. It takes a long time for this to happen. Remember, inflation peaked in the global economy, as you pointed out, in 1990, in the US even before that. But it took 10 or 20 years for people to really appreciate that trend. I think that similarly now, these are the very incipient signs that inflation could begin to rise, prices could begin to increase. We will go through in the subsequent segment how commodity prices, which have been so low for such a long period of time, could contribute to higher inflation. But I think that this is something which is there. The seeds are being sown for inflation to gradually begin to turn higher across the world after this extraordinary period of very low inflation.